Have any of you heard of the singer John Mark McMillan? I doubt many hands are going to go up. He's a Christian songwriter. Unfortunately, he's most known because people like to cover his songs, but he's written a lot of amazing songs, a few of which we sing here. You just heard a little snippet of his most famous song, How He Loves. And I first heard about him when I heard that song back in 2010. It's a great song. I highly recommend all of his stuff. What you may not know, unless you're a music nerd like me, is that there's a little bit of a debate about that song. And the debate lies around the fact that he has a line in the song that says, "When heaven meets earth like a sloppy wet kiss." That's something that doesn't normally appear in most praise and worship songs, right? It sounds a little awkward. And in fact, most of the people who have covered it, generally the consensus was that it would be uncomfortable for people to sing that in church. So they've changed the lyrics to "When heaven meets earth like an unforeseen kiss." So slight difference there. Around the time that I first heard about the song, I read an interview from John Mark where he basically was communicating his frustration with modern worship music. And basically what he said was that, to paraphrase, he feels like modern worship music is very controlled, very comfortable, very safe, predictable. It tells one side of the story, but it doesn't tell all of it. And I'll give you an example. Maybe you've heard the lines, my God, why have you forsaken me?" It's one of the last things Jesus said while he was dying on the cross. It's the first line of Psalm 22, which was a praise and worship song for the Israelites. We don't sing a lot of songs that says, my God, why have you forsaken me, right? There's more to the story than just comfortable, warm, fuzzy songs, right? So John Mark kind of had a little bit of a frustration with that. He kind of felt like the line, "When heaven meets earth like a sloppy wet kiss," we should have to work with the discomfort of saying something that's so awkward. So anyway, in a sense, I'm going to use that concept as my underlying theme as we dive into the Bible today. I think you'll see where I'm going with it. And so poetically, I titled the message, "A Sloppy Wet Kiss." Probably the first time you've ever heard a message called that. All right. So as we dive in, when people think of Christianity, a lot of times they see Christians as following this guy who, first of all, has very beautiful, long, flowing hair, which, by the way, a first century Jew would not have. And they see him as stoic, kind of boring, gentle, but kind of just really calm and boring. When you actually dive into the Gospels, that's not what you see. One of my favorite things about the book of Luke is that there's this whole chunk of Luke where Jesus is literally going from party to party to party, and of course he's stirring up trouble on the way. And in fact, keep in mind, what was Jesus' first miracle? He turned water to wine at a party. Everybody said it was the good stuff. And obviously, if you were at a party and somebody did that, that would be a really awesome party trick. I would love to teach a series on Jesus, the party animal. Unfortunately, they only gave me one morning. So we're going to stick with one party. And we're going to be working out of Luke 15. So again, like I said, he's at a party. And when we get to Luke 15, in verse 1, if we could dive into that, it starts off with, "Now the tax collectors and the sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, 'This man welcomes sinners and eats with them.'" A couple things to throw out real fast. I don't have time to dive into all of the background on tax collectors, but if you don't know, in first century Israel, tax collectors were hated. They were serious social outcasts. They were viewed as traitors. Okay? And so it said, let's see, so we had tax collectors and sinners. If you don't know what a sinner is, you are one. I am too. But for the context of the story, it's basically whoever the religious elite that were there wanted to judge. Okay? So then we have the religious elite, the religious leaders. By the way, first of all, keep in mind, what were the tax collectors and sinners doing? They were listening receptively to Jesus. Okay? So now we get to the religious leaders. They were muttering. Okay? Muttering is a really important word to note there. If you don't know, so the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, if you dive back there, you see in Exodus the Israelites are set free from slavery in Egypt and they leave Egypt. But before they get to the promised land, they spend a chunk of time wandering in the wilderness. It sounds like fun. It's kind of like what the men are doing this weekend. So they're wandering in the wilderness. And as they're going through this season, every time they hit a bump, every time they need something, every time they have a little craving, instead of saying, hey, God, can you help us here? We really need help. Hey, God, we're struggling right now. Hey, God, we'd really like to eat some meat for dinner tonight, which is one of their requests, by the way. Instead of going to him respectfully and just saying, hey, can you help us here, it uses the word grumble. They grumble. Basically what it means is they talk trash about God. They completely disrespect him. Instead of asking nicely, they just jump into talking trash about him. For example, saying, we were better off in Egypt as slaves, which, if you don't know the story, the Egyptians were killing their babies and working them to death. So I want meat for dinner tonight. They were killing my babies. Not much of a comparison, but when we want to complain, we don't always make the wisest choices there. But when you are reading the Bible and you come across words like grumble, mutter, or any other synonyms, that should raise a red flag for you that it's basically somebody's doing something really wrong here. They are talking trash about God, and it's ridiculous. Okay? That's what you need to take out of it. And so that's what the religious leaders are doing. The irony is the religious leaders are judging the sinners, but the text makes it clear that they are actually the ones that are in the wrong here. They are the true sinners in this scene. So Jesus is going to respond to them. Because, of course, when the authority says you're doing something wrong, what do? You talk back, right? Just kidding. He actually is very respectful in how he does it. And what he does is he tells them 3 parables. If you don't know what a parable is, sometimes people want to think of them as like a fable. Like Aesop's fables, there's no rabbits, there's no turtles in parables. They are not moral stories. A parable, Jesus is telling kind of a fictional story, but he uses elements from first century life in Israel, and it's things that they will recognize. And the whole point of a parable is to explain something that's really complex about the kingdom of God or God himself. So parables are not moral stories. They're telling us something about God. All right. So the first parable. I'm just going to jump into it really fast. The first parable, there's a rich guy. He's got 100 sheep. He loses one. So he's got 99 left. And what does he do? He leaves the 99. We just sung about that. He leaves the 99 and he goes and chases down the one. And when he gets it, he's excited that he got it. And so he's going to party hard with his friends. And it says that even God would celebrate. Okay? If you lose your sheep, God will celebrate. The next one is really simple. There is a woman who is... it's implied that she's probably poor, and she has 10 coins. It's not like she has a dime. 10 coins, each coin is worth about a day's wage. That's a little bit of a chunk of change, right? She loses one. She's going to tear her house apart until she finds it. When she finds it, she's going to be excited. People are going to be excited for her. If I lost a day's paycheck and then I found it again, my wife would be happy about that. And in the same way, God celebrates when one person comes to Christ. But either way, something is lost, now it's found. People are compelled to celebrate with them, and God definitely celebrates with them. And that brings us to where we're at in the story. You'll notice I have my notepad here. I told you I'm a teacher. I speak with a board. I even brought multiple colors so that we can color. All right. So the meat of our story is a story that you probably know as the Prodigal Son. So we're going to explore that. As soon as it starts, Jesus says, there was a man who had 2 sons. Now, traditionally, again, you've heard it called the Prodigal Son, But anybody who's taken an English class can read that and see that it says there was a man who had two sons. The two sons are supporting characters. It's not there was a son who had a father and a brother, right? It says there was a man who had two sons. Remember, a parable tells us something about the kingdom of God or God, right? So if you can't read my writing, I understand it's a little messy. I spent the last year teaching ancient history, so just pretend like it's hieroglyphics. But over here we have the father, the older son, and the younger son. Okay? All right. So there was a man who had two sons. Okay? And then as we dive in, one thing I want to explain to you, little history class. This is extremely important. If you've never heard this before, this should shape how you read your Bible. The entirety of the Bible takes place in a culture that's very different than ours. It's called an honor and shame culture. We do not live in an honor and shame culture, so we miss honor and shame elements in the Bible, but it changes how you read it. In an honor and shame culture, it's really simple. Everything is based off of honor and shame. You do everything you can to maintain and hold on to your honor, and if you can increase it, that's even better. You do everything you can to avoid any shame. Shame is horrible. In fact, a lot of times death is even better than shame, and your shame will be contagious to those around you. The best example I can give you, I hate using this stereotype, but if you think of the stereotypes of like an Asian culture, a lot of times the Asian cultures are honor and shame cultures. So think of any movie you've seen about Asian culture or whatever, where somebody does something wrong and now they're shamed, and the family, you're shamed, you need to leave. Or an Asian warrior fights a battle, and even though they fight valiantly, they lose the battle. So now the honorable thing would be for them to die instead of live with that shame, right? That's an honor and shame culture, and the entire Bible takes place in honor and shame cultures. Okay? And you're going to see how that shows up in this story. All right. So, the very first thing, the younger son says to the father, "Give me my share of the estate." Doesn't sound like it should be that big of a deal, but it's actually serious. He goes to his father and says, "Give me my share of the estate." Just like in our culture, when you write a will, people don't get anything from it until you die, right? So to go to your father and say, "Give me my share of the estate," literally is saying, "I wish you were dead. I want my inheritance." You don't get your inheritance until the father's dead. As a father, if one of my daughters came to me and said, "I wish you were dead, just give me my money," first of all, I'd probably laugh. I'm a teacher, I don't have money. But second of all, that would be heartbreaking, right? She just said that all she wants is my money. She wishes I was dead, right? So this is seriously heartbreaking that he said this. Whether you're a parent or not, I think you can feel the impact of that, right? The second part of this is we go to the honor and shame part. He just completely shamed his father. He just said he wishes his father was dead. He wants his money. Shame, okay? Now, if you were to flip to Deuteronomy 21, I'm not going to even ask you to do that. I'll tell you a summary of what it says. There's a part in there where it talks about what to do with a rebellious child, okay? A rebellious son. And it basically says, in short, if your son is rebellious and he won't shape up, then you take him to the city gates where the elders are, and you stand him before the elders, and if they agree with you, well, he's going to get stoned. And they're not talking about like a Pink Floyd soundtrack playing, okay? He's going to be killed. Now, here's the deal. What most people don't understand about the law of Israel is that for us, when you see a speed limit sign that says 25 miles per hour, none of us follow it, but we still know that it means you're supposed to be under 25, right? For Jewish law, it's actually just a paradigm. So when you see that, the whole point isn't necessarily that you're supposed to kill your child. In fact, we have no record of anybody doing it, but it does mean take this very seriously. I'll give you another example. Mary and Joseph. When Joseph finds out Mary's pregnant and he knows it's not his, the law says that you're supposed to stone an adulterous wife, but he doesn't. He's still a righteous man, but he says he's going to divorce her. He takes it seriously, but it doesn't mean that you literally have to kill her. Does that make sense? Are you guys following me? It tells you that what's important. It helps you understand what's important, but there's some gray areas in there. Either way, Deuteronomy 21 says he's supposed to take this pretty seriously, right? By the way, that law is for older children. Otherwise, none of us would have made it past the age of 3. Okay, so he says to his father, "I wish you were dead to me. Give me my money." And so, according to Deuteronomy, 21, the father's supposed to take that really seriously and take serious action. So the serious action that he takes is he does it. He divides the property between them, between his two sons. Real quick, inheritance laws, the way it works is the older son gets 2 shares. The younger sons will always get 1 share. So in this, it's really simple. The math is simple. I don't do math, but this one's easy. There's 2 kids. One gets 2 shares. The other one gets 1, right? Does that make sense? Okay, so the father's supposed to divide it up. All right. Then it says, not long after that, the younger son got together all he had and set off for a distant country. This is important. That means that in order for the younger son to get the money from the father had to sell 1/3 of the property, right? So it's gone. It's permanently gone from the family. It's been liquidated. And did you note that, by the way, he divided it between them? So the older son did get his share too. So there's 2/3 left in the family, 1/3's gone. The money's handed to the younger son, and it says that he leaves the country. Another thing to know about the culture. When it says that they're going to leave the promised land, from Joshua on, when somebody leaves the promised land, it means they're leaving the covenant. They're leaving the covering of God. We see this in the story of Ruth. When Naomi and her family leaves Israel to go to Moab, which, by the way, was Israel's enemy, they're leaving God's covering and God's covenant, and what happens? Something bad happens. Then they do the right thing and they return. Here, the son is leaving the country, which means he's going out from under his father's authority, out from under his father's covering. And it says there he squandered his wealth. Where you put your money is where your heart is, and his heart is in wild living. I'm sure many of us have probably had that season in our life. It says after he spends everything, there's a severe famine. Crazy what happens when you go out from your parents' covering. There's a severe famine in the whole country, and he begins to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country. He doesn't want to be under his father's authority, but he wants to be under the authority of a Gentile. Interesting, isn't it? And that Gentile has him go out into the fields to feed the pigs. If you don't know this about Israeli culture, pigs are disgusting. Pigs are untouchable. You wouldn't have found pigs in ancient Israel. When Jesus, for example, sends the demons into pigs, he's actually in Gentile land when he does that. You don't find pigs in Israel because pigs are disgusting to an Israelite. They're unclean. They're horrible. What does he do? He's now submitted to a Gentile, and he's feeding pigs. In fact, there's a Jewish tradition from the time that says that if you feed pigs, you're cursed. And then the next line says in verse 16 that he longed to fill his stomach with the food the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. So what we've now watched is we've watched as he sunk and hit rock bottom. I'm sure I'm not the only person here that's ever hit rock bottom in life. Okay, he hits rock bottom. But as you've probably heard, the one good thing about hitting rock bottom is that there's only one way to go from there, right? The very next verse tells us that when he comes to his senses, which implies he's starting to repent, he says, how many of my father's hired servants, how many of the people that actually submit to my father's authority have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out, I will go back to my father and say to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. Where it says heaven, you could actually fit in the word God. I've sinned against God and you, and I am no longer worthy to be your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. And he gets up and goes back to his father. He's now ready to submit to his father, to be under his father's covering. Now, my daughters don't need to call me master, but they're certainly under my covering. I care for them. I take care of them. I love them, right? Honor and shame culture, when you have been shamed, you don't go back. You stay away. Remember, your shame is contagious. But either way, he somehow finds it in him to want to go back to his father, which takes a lot, right? That's going to take a lot from him. So, he's going to go back. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. This implies something really powerful. Even though, remember Deuteronomy 21, the father's supposed to be, no, you're out of here. Well, you're supposed to be stoned. And yet we see this father who's watching. It implies that he's actually spent the time watching the horizon, hoping one day his son will come back. Now, if one of my daughters came to a point in her life, luckily my kids are young enough, I don't have to stress about this too much yet, but I hope I don't have to. If one of my daughters had gone out like that, and she was lost and confused in the world, how could I not watch the horizon? How could I not hope she would come back, right? That's what the Father's doing. He's not just, forget him. He's done. I'm done with him. No, he's watching, and he has compassion when he sees him a long way off. So how does the Father respond? Really simple. It says he ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. Okay. He ran to him. In first century Palestine, patriarchs don't run for two reasons. First of all, I'll get there when I get there. You can wait for me. But there's the second part. The second part is that the outfits they wore, the best example I could think of, if you've seen Indiana Jones, the Raiders of the Lost Ark, right? You see people in the Middle East, the kind of clothes they wear, the gowns, all of that, the robes, right? So if you picture a man, probably not a young man either, wearing this robe, and of course they didn't have like nice Hanes boxers or something, they had like weird undergarment things and stuff. In order to run, he's going to have to pick up his robe, maybe even shove it in. Sometimes they would have to shove it into basically their underrobe. He's going to have to pick it up, and he's going to run. Now, that probably looked pretty foolish when I did it. It would have looked worse for somebody that actually was doing it then. That right there is shame. Patriarchs don't run, but he ran to his son, probably a good distance, because it says that he saw him a long way off. Number two, PDA is shameful. Public display of affection is shameful in their culture. Short of a simple little peck on the cheek, kind of brotherly kiss, you don't do public displays of affection. But what did it say that he did? It says that he embraced the son. Now, scholars take two positions on it. I'm going to say that I kind of have a mixture of both of those. Number one is that he was so excited to see his son and so filled with passion that he embraced him. Makes a lot of sense. I get that. The second one is, remember Deuteronomy 21 again, shame is contagious. As that son with all that shame is coming back, the village could have gone after him because they don't want his shame in their midst. So by the father running and embracing him and covering him, he's literally covering himself, covering the son with his own body, saying, you're not going to touch him. He's my son. Either way, whether you take the PDA route or the covering route, I say it's probably both, but you can choose. That's shame. And then it says he kisses him. It's not going to be a peck on the cheek. I'm not going to act it out for you right now. It would look a little weird, but he is passionately kissing his son. Right there, that is a sloppy, wet kiss. I just spit. Just made it sloppier. It's a sloppy, wet kiss, right? He's passionately kissing him. More PDA. Tons of shame right there, right? That the father is taking on for the son. Now, it says that the son responds. Remember that whole long speech the son was going to give? The son gets out, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer to be worthy to call your son. But the father said to the servants, quick! The father cut him off. He's not going to listen to it. You don't need a big speech here. Don't even tell me about you're not worthy to be called my son. You are my son. Quick! Bring the robe, put it up, being the best robe. Put it on him. Put a ring on his finger, sandals on his feet. Here we go again. The best robe would have been the father's robe. Bring my robe and put it on him. Which points us back to Genesis 3:21. After the fall, Adam and Eve are standing there. They're naked. They're in shame. And what does God do? He takes an animal and he makes clothes for Adam and Eve to cover up their shame. The first sacrifice. Okay? It's the same thing. The father takes his best robe and puts it on him. So he's taking on more for the son. And the ring would have been the family ring. It says that he's the son of the father. Put it on him. He's my son. Oh, keep in mind the son would have been wearing probably pretty tattered clothes, pretty much like half naked and very messy looking. So he's covering it up, right? The ring on the finger. He's my son. And the sandals on the feet. The sandals on the feet actually mean something. It's not just, let's go buy some new shoes. Okay, the sandals on the feet. Slaves don't wear sandals. Most servants don't wear sandals. You're not a servant. You're not a slave. You're the son of the patriarch. Let's get some sandals on your feet. Okay? So there's a whole lot more that the Father's doing here to cover for the Son. Then he says, bring the fattened calf. Bring the fattened calf, kill it, we're going to party hard. Okay, the fattened calf. It's not a cute little cow running around, right? I hope that's not going to get posted anywhere. It's not a cute little calf. It's actually a cow that's young. Does that make sense? It's going to be the best meat possible, though. And this cow could feed dozens of people. Okay? This is not a father-son date. They're going to have a party, and it's going to bring everyone in. Well, wait a minute. Wouldn't everyone have an issue? Not anymore, because the Father covered him. He's restored, and they're going to party hard. Why are they going to party hard? Well, because my son of mine was dead. He's alive again. He was lost, and he is found, and they began to celebrate. Okay? That right there is pretty amazing stuff. Wouldn't you agree? All right. Hope you didn't get too bored with the history lesson. We're not done. All right. So, the younger son. One way or another, everyone in this room is the younger son. Okay? I know that sounds weird if you're a female, but just go with me here. We all wander from God. We all worship things that are not God, and we put them above God. We all have questions about God at times that allow us to be distanced from Him, which, by the way, if you have any questions about God, the church is the safest place, or at least it should be the safest place for you to be, and you are more than welcome to come sit at my table and talk with me. I have all the time in the world for you. Okay? And we all go through seasons when we get angry at God and blame Him for things. Like what? It could be for anything. The death of someone you love is one. And it's very understandable that that would make you upset. I get that. God gets that. Okay? You need to understand that. If you were to read through all of the Psalms, you will find many, many of them are times when people are expressing confusion about something God has done, or even anger or frustration at God. Okay? It's okay. In fact, that song, How He Loves, when John Mark wrote it, he actually was writing it because he had been woken up in the middle of the night by a phone call telling him one of his very best friends had died. And he immediately became really upset at God. How could you do that? All the things I've done for you, how could you possibly do that to me? And he came to a point when he realized, okay, it's messed up to be upset at God. It's not God's fault. But then he felt bad about it. And he came to the realization that, no, God is a compassionate Father who not only is wanting to walk back with him, but also to walk with him through the journey of healing, okay? You don't need to feel bad about things like that. You just need to move forward, okay? The Father is watching for you. If you are in a season right now where you have wandered away from God for whatever reason, that there's a distance between you and God, you need to know that He's watching for you. He's waiting for you just to take that first step. You don't need to wait until everything's perfect. You don't need to wait until you've got everything figured out. I have a secret for you, you never will. You just don't have to wait. You don't have to wait until you get everything straightened out. The reality is, God can help you get it straightened out a lot better than you can on your own. You don't have to wait until you're done feeling angry at God. You don't have to wait. He's watching and waiting for you to just turn and face Him, and He will run the distance to you. And He's waiting for that, okay? And the fun part is that when He's waiting for you is that He wants to run towards you and cover you with sloppy, wet kisses. Okay. Just know that there's no shame in the fact that there's distance between you and God. You don't have to have shame. He already took the shame, right? You don't have to have shame. You just need to come to Him. Okay? Here's the other cool thing is that when you come to him, he's going to throw a massive party, and I don't need to say it again, but anyway, nobody knows how to party like God. Okay? So it's going to be good. All right. So we didn't finish the story, though. Jesus didn't finish responding. I know. It's a long story, but check this out. It gets cool. So, in verse 25, meanwhile, the older son was out in the field. He didn't know about the party? That's interesting. Maybe doesn't have a good cell reception out there. I don't know. He doesn't know about the party because he's busy doing his own thing. He's separated himself in his own way, and he's busy doing his own thing. So what is he doing? All right. So it says he's out in the field, and when he comes near to the house, he hears the music, he sees the dancing, the DJ's playing, everything's great. And so he calls over one of the servants and asks them what's going on. And he says, your brother's come. Your father killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound, which should be a reason to party. And in their culture, the older son has a few responsibilities. First of all, in a party, he's supposed to be the main host. As everybody walks in, he's going to be the one, come on in, let me grab you a cup. He's going to make sure the cup is filled. He's going to make sure you're comfortable. He's going to do everything he can to make this the most amazing party to honor his father. And if you go back to the very beginning of the story, by the way, the older son is supposed to defend the honor of his father. When the younger son said, I wish you were dead, can I have my money? What did the older son do? He took his money, right? He took his share. But we get to this party, and let's see, does the older brother come in and say, all right, I'm going to be the host? No, it says the older brother became angry, and he refused to go in. He refused to go in. He shamed his father. And not only did he shame his father, but now he did it in front of everyone. At least the younger son did have the dignity to do it in the house. He's doing this in front of the whole village. He refused to go in. And what happens? Deuteronomy 21 again. Does the father go, okay, you're going to go get stoned? No. The father goes out to him and pleads with him. The father runs to him as well. The father doesn't need to go to plead with his son. Shame. Major sin. This is actually probably more shameful than the first part. Okay? Well, the older son's going to explain why he's upset. And he says, look. Who responds to their father with look? At least every time the younger son referred to his father, he called him father first. The older son just says, look. Right there in front of everybody, disrespecting his father. Look. All these years, I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Wait a minute, is he a son or a slave? All these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders, yet you never even gave me a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. Notice, so we could celebrate is not what he says there. So I could go celebrate with others. You didn't give me what I want, so I could go celebrate with others. But when this son of yours, not when my brother, this son of yours, which actually brings us back to Genesis 3 with Adam and Eve, when God says, what did you do? Adam's first response is, this woman that you put here, and the woman says, and the snake, here we go, this son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home and you killed the fattened calf. He's separated himself from them, not father, not my brother, no, the son of yours, look. And by the way, was there ever any mention of prostitutes before? No, it said while living. He could have been drinking. He could have been gambling. It didn't say, and he doesn't know. He made an assumption. He's tearing his brother down. Okay, so we have seen massive boatloads of shame that he's now brought on the father. It's not just the younger son who has messed up here. It's the older son as well. All right, so how does the father respond? My son, the father said, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. From the very beginning, remember, everything I have was yours. You didn't need a goat from me. The goat was already yours. Everything I have is yours, but we had to celebrate. We are compelled to celebrate. We have to celebrate. And be glad because the brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. That's the end of the story. There's no resolution. Interesting. If you went to watch a movie that had no resolution like that, it would make you mad. There's no resolution. When you see these stories where they have no resolution, there's a reason. It's asking a question. What are you going to do? And remember, he's directing these parables to the religious leaders, right? But everybody's listening. He's at a party. It'd be kind of fun to go to a party where somebody's telling these crazy stories like this. All right. So what are you going to do? All right. So when many people look at this story, they focus on the younger son. But what is Jesus telling us about the older one? So there's a pattern. So remember the younger son, his solution when he was thinking about repenting was that he was going to go back and hire himself out to his father as a servant, right? And I didn't really touch on that. He's going to hire himself out as a servant, which means he's going to now submit to his father's covering. But it also implies that he likely was hoping to take the money to repay his father, okay? He was going to hire himself out as a servant to his father, and what does the father say? That's ridiculous. You're my son. And he covered him in what? Sloppy, wet kisses, right? Loving, compassionate, graceful, merciful kisses. What does the older son say? All these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed. He sees himself as the man's servant. Not his father's servant, by the way. The man's servant. But the man said, no, you're my son. The older brother was in it for what he thought he was owed. That's why he was so upset about the situation with his younger brother. His younger brother's not owed anything. He brought shame on the family, right? He's in it for what he thought he deserved from the father, for all the things he had done for the father. And the father said, everything I have is already yours. If our focus is on giving to God so that he will give to us, being so good that we think that we could earn God's favor, we're the older brothers. And many of us go through seasons of doing that, where we think that we're so awesome, we should already have earned God's favor. I think people who have been Christians for a long time especially can be guilty of this, the idea of we think that we've already got our life together. We at least want to look perfect so everybody thinks that we have our life together. We're going to do all these things. We're going to go to church on Sunday, and God should just take care of us and make all our dreams come true as if he was a genie. Everything I have is already yours, though. He doesn't want to hear us talking about sacrificing and slaving away for him. He doesn't need hired help. He wants his children. That's what he sees us as, is his children. My daughters cannot earn my love. Lila, my older daughter, from the moment I heard her heartbeat in a monitor, I fell in love with her. And there's nothing she could do to earn my love. I heard a heartbeat, I was in love. Okay? There's nothing that she can do to earn my love, and there's nothing she can do to lose it. I have certainly lost hair. I've lost my sanity. I've lost my memory. But my love has not been lost. It can't be lost no matter what she does, right? God is the same way. There are times when we drive God crazy. There are times when we upset God. There are times when we do things that frustrate God. Yes, but he's still looking at you the same way I look at my daughter when she drives me nuts. Yes, you drove me nuts, but I absolutely love you. And when we are hurting, God looks at us the same way I look at my daughter when she's hurting. I want to scoop her up in my arms and make everything better, right? All right. There is nothing we can do here. God is the one that's watching and waiting for us. We just need to take that step. We just need to turn and look to him. Okay? Here's the thing. Remember, everybody is in that room, both the sinners and the tax collectors, as well as the religious leaders. The younger brothers and the older brothers were all in that room, but the same invitation went out to all of them. You are all welcome at this table. Please come sit at this table with me. We're drinking wine, eating bread, and partying hard. The music is good. Come sit down and party with me. And that invitation goes out to everyone that was there. It's the same thing for all of us. You can't earn a seat at that table. It's there for you already by the grace of God. It's already covered. Your entrance fee has already been paid. You just need to walk in. You're already on the VIP list. Okay? As for the kiss, if right now, make my wife feel awkward. If my wife was to walk up right now and just give me a kiss on the cheek, that would be unforeseen, right? It actually would probably throw me off being on stage, have my wife do that. It would be unforeseen. The father in the story didn't just walk up and give a kiss, though. It was an unbridled, passionate embrace and sloppy, wet kisses. And when we sing that song, How He Loves, it's the same way. We're not singing about God coming up and giving us a peck on the cheek. We're singing about God giving sloppy, wet kisses. It's the sloppy, wet kiss of the cross of Christ. And it's wet with his blood. And we can mourn for that, and we should mourn for that in a sense. But even more so, we need to celebrate that. We need to celebrate that. The Father in the story is God, and he sacrificed himself out of grace for us. Okay? And I need you to take a moment to think about that and embrace that. We are his children, and he has restored us. Just like he offered that invitation to restoration to both sons. We call that story the Prodigal Son story, and I'm going to tell you why. Real fast, if you don't know what the word prodigal means, it means wastefully or recklessly extravagant, lavishly abundant in giving or spending. We call it the Prodigal Son story because the younger son squandered his money, right? But I'm going to argue that the true prodigal in the story was the father who abundantly, lovingly lavished his son in so much love and grace and took all the shame on himself. That is prodigal. That is extravagant. That is lavish, right? And he did it all with sloppy, wet kisses. All right. So now, hopefully forever, when you hear that song, even if you see that it says an unforeseen kiss, maybe it gives you a little bit of a different perspective as to what's going on in there. Thank you for letting me give you a drawn-out history lesson. When you're teaching, you can just carry the lesson on to the next class. Sorry if I went a little long. All right. Father, there is absolutely nothing I could say right now that could truly honor how much you've given us. And I'm not even going to try. I'm not going to be like the older brother and try. I'm just going to recognize how beautiful of a gift you have given us, and the very idea that you would call me your son, that you would call us your sons and daughters, is just absolutely amazing. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Daddy. We love you. Amen.